So Carey Mulligan, in Wildlife, you play another woman who was born decades before you were. You often act in films that are about, looking back at our past and kind of examining the ways in which women were treated in society, things like in education, Mudbound, Suffragette. Is there something that draws you to those kinds of stories?
I don't know. I mean, I think they've all just felt like real women to me. So um, it's not been a sort of deliberate kind of political choice or anything. It's just been about these women having dimension and a kind of interesting story. But there does seem to be a sort of a through line with them in retrospect.
Well, you do play a lot of women who are more contemporary as well. Do you think there's something in particular with a film like Wildlife, which is set in the late 50s, early 60s, I
Yeah, it's
believe? Yeah.
1960. Yeah,
Thank
exactly.
you. Do you think there's something that people can learn about the world that we live in today through a film like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the truth of it is that things haven't changed massively since 1960. Really, in the feeling, and particularly even in the way that we think about women and the way that we experience women in cinema, and we've been doing Q&As for this film, and we've had sort of quite strong reactions to my character, principally because she's just not doing the right thing, and she's not being a great mum, and she's not being the perfect housewife, and even just that reaction, the way that we hold women up differently to the way that we hold men, has been a reminder that a lot of the things that run through Wildlife are still pretty relevant today.
It's interesting watching the development of your character. Talk a bit about Jeanette. Who is this woman?
So Jeanette is a 34-year-old housewife. She's got a 14-year-old son. She's been married since she was 19, and you're sort of meeting her in the worst week of her life, but also the week where she kind of starts the journey of figuring out who she is. So it's sort of a coming of age story, I suppose, for the whole family, but for her, for sure, in that there's a version of her that existed when she was 18 that she's trying to remember, and a lot of the story is her just trying to figure out her identity outside of mother and wife, and the things that she's gotten used to, and see if there's anything left of the person that she was before she entered into these arrangements. So she does that in various ways, and but it's kind of sparked by her husband leaving and going to fight this wildfire.
It's fascinating watching the ways in which your character evolves or devolves, depending on your interpretation of the film,
Yeah.
once your husband leaves to go off and fight these wildfires after losing his job. I thought it was really interesting the ways in which you see how proud he is, and how he refuses to take a menial job, and that forces you to have to go out and defy the role that is usually accustomed to housewives at the time. You have to go out and find a job of your own.
Yeah, I think there's a contract between the two of them that's been held up for so long that as long as he keeps getting the job and trying, and even if he loses the job, getting another one, that she will continue to keep this veneer up, and and smile at everything and take everything very well, and be the housewife, be the mother, and manage on very little. And it's when his side of the contract falls apart that things really spin out of control. And I think that's it. He just, there's something in him kind of breaks, and he's equally having an identity crisis. So in a way, a lot of the story is about like two people who met when they were really young and decided on a life, and are now kind of checking in on whether that was the right choice for them.
And you mentioned your son. Talk a bit about the relationship between the two of them. I mean, you mentioned her age as well, 34, so she's 20 years old when she had this child. So there's not that much age difference between the two.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting relationship, because when you meet them, it seems so conventional, and she's doing everything in a very expected manner, and she treats him the way that you would expect a 14-year-old to be treated, and it's all very amiable and respectful and kind of proper. and then all the properness just dissolves, and you see. And I think part of what she's doing with him is she's trying to sort of burn down any idea that he had of her to try and become someone else. And I think she feels, you know, it's not ideal logic, but in whatever she's going through, she feels like if she can disillusion him of any version that he thought of her as being the sort of perfect mother, the perfect wife, and sort of tell him the truth of who she is, then maybe she'll be able to figure out what that is. But it's such a kind of bizarre logic, but, you know, trying to eradicate the idea of her that he had before, and in doing that she exposes him to all sorts of things that he shouldn't be exposed to, and you know, and they're definitely regrettable decisions, but it sort of seems like her only way of getting through it.
Mm-hmm. And then there's this relationship that develops between you and Bill Camp's character. What do you think draws her to him?
I mean, I think, you know, there's an element of this that she's a woman in the 1960s. She has no skill set. She doesn't have an education beyond high school, so she can't get a job, and he is a stable source of income. You know, she's not going to be able to clothe her son and pay the rent and feed him. So he is a stable man who can provide, and I think there's flattery in there, and that, you know, he thinks of her as the prettiest girl in the room, or treats her that way. And I think, you know, this idea that her life just could have taken a very different turn had she not met Jerry. She could have had all of those things, and there is something materialistic about her. She likes to have nice things, and she would like to live a life of kind of relative ease and luxury, but that's been not an option for her. So again, it's like going back to Jeanette at 18, who did she imagine she could have married? And I think Warren is one of those people that she imagined that she could have ended up with, the local millionaire. And
there's this great scene about midway through the movie where it's the three of you, you and Bill Camp and your son. It's almost like a little short film in and of itself, where you go over to his house for dinner, and you're kind of, I mean, she goes through an entire thing. Can you talk a bit about that scene?
Yeah, so that's sort of, you know, midway, so the whole film is set over a week, but midway through that week, Jeanette decides to go to dinner at Warren Miller's house and kind of almost present her son to him. And I think she's trying to sort of bring him as part of the package, like, you know, it'll be me and my son if you take us on, kind of thing. So she gets Joe to put on a new shirt and takes him over there. And she wildly misjudges the evening, and walks in a dress that she refers to as her desperation dress, as if she's just trying to sort of get something concrete to hold on to. But she goes in full of nerves. She thinks she's sort of aligning herself to a lot of Warren Miller says and thinks, but she isn't, so that frustrates her, and she's kind of constantly changing tactic and trying to kind of put down her husband and make Warren Miller feel special, but by doing that he sort of loses respect for her. So there's this bizarre little dance that's going on where she's trying to align herself with him, but he's sort of pushing her off gently, and Joe is just sat there witnessing all of this, and she's also getting progressively more drunk. Towards the end of the evening, she's sort of slightly lost control of herself, but then is confronted by her son being there, who is obviously an immediate reminder of her husband, of everything that she's lost and everything she's in the midst of losing, and the sort of stark reminder that the responsibility never goes away, and that's her son, and that she's sort of disgracing everything. So it's like a complete roller coaster that was incredibly hard to map out, because kind of just being out of control on camera is not very interesting to watch. But by the end of the evening, they've kind of gone home, and Joe has witnessed a lot of things that he shouldn't have seen.
This is the directorial debut of Paul Dano. You've worked with a lot of great directors, so has he, for that matter. What was it like working with him as a director? What did he give you that helped you with this performance?
I mean, so many things. I've always loved Paul. I've always loved everything he's done on screen, so I was kind of intimidated to work with him because he's so brilliant. But I think that's what I knew he would bring to this film. He's just such an honest person. He's so honest in his work, and all of his work has such integrity. No matter what the genre of the film is, he always brings this sort of truth to it. So as a director, it sort of felt like doing theatre, especially the way that Jake and I worked with him. It was a lot of, we would rehearse the scene the night before and come on set, and then the way he framed things was he did it with such confidence, but also the camera didn't move unless it needed to. So oftentimes we found ourselves with the freedom of the whole space just to do what we wanted to. And within that, he was really good at just creating a brilliant environment for us to work in, but then coming in with exactly the right note at the right time to sort of, send the scene into a different direction. And I remember specifically in the scene that we were just talking about at Warren Miller's house, I was struggling with it. And he came over sort of midway through my coverage and said, just do a terrible take. Do the worst thing ever. Just do anything, just do whatever and do something awful and just fuck it up completely. And I promise I won't let it go in the film if it doesn't work. And, just sort of giving that, allowing that kind of freedom was just so amazing.
Does it help having somebody with that kind of insider perspective of how an actor thinks, to...
Yeah, definitely. And I think, he's also known me for 10 years, right. And and I've talked to him about other jobs, and I've been on stage with Zoe Kazan, and he's seen me in other plays, and so I've talked to him a lot about the kind of things that the pitfalls that I fall into, and the struggles that the anxieties that I have with the work, and all of that stuff. So he kind of knew where I needed to be encouraged or pushed, or I think based on all of our previous conversations before working together as well.
One of the remarkable things about this movie is its tone, which is very delicate. It kind of, you mentioned a lot about the sense of loss and regret, and I think that kind of permeates throughout it, this kind of feeling of sadness. Can you talk a bit about capturing that tone as an actor?
Yeah, I think, that's probably more to do with the way that Paul chose to, the script kind of had that feeling. But I think the thing that I found more interesting to kind of explore was nostalgia. And that kind of came up as a theme for me the whole way through shooting. It was just, there was something so nostalgic about the way that week was happening, and that wasn't passive, but it was kind of hitting her. So it was like whiplash. So, she would hear a song and start humming it, and then would be thinking about dancing to that song at her wedding, and that held a kind of terrible sadness in it. So the whole way through shooting it, I thought of it less as sadness, of more like nostalgia, and how do we deal with nostalgia? Nostalgia can scare us, and nostalgia can make us do really crazy things, because if you suddenly recognize that time is passing, which is essentially what nostalgia is, how do you react to that? What do you do? When you realize that you're not 20 anymore, and you'll never be 20 again? What can that force you into things that you wouldn't ordinarily do?
I'm about to deal with that myself soon. To that end, I don't think about this often with every movie I see, because we see a lot and they just sort of end, but I kind of left the movie wondering what's going to happen to these three people, your character, Jake Gyllenhaal, and your son. Did you think about that at all? Where do you think these people end up?
Yeah, I do. I have my own, I'm a romantic, so my version of it is of reconciliation. Down the line. I don't think an immediate one, but I think down the line. But I don't know what Paul would say. I suspect he would say not. But for me, there's something down the line for them.
I wanted to ask you, you were Oscar nominated for In Education, which was your big, coming out film. You had obviously acted before that, but I think people became aware of Carey Mulligan as a leading lady with that. Tell us a little bit about that experience and what that recognition meant so early on in your career.
Yeah, it was kind of so out of left field. I didn't really know what to do with it. I wish I'd had more fun. I wish I'd just enjoyed it and taken it for what it was. But I think I felt, we made An Education. It was the first time I played a lead in really anything, let alone a film. And I kind of thought it was going to spend a week at the Curzon in Mayfair in London, and that would be it. I didn't think it would be in cinemas, really. So just that alone kind of shocked me. And then everything that came along with it, I guess I didn't know, I was just sort of a rabbit in the headlights. So, it was great, and it afforded me the opportunity to meet directors that I then went on to work with that, I had the most incredible experiences on. But the process was just, I can't even remember half of it. Do you know what I mean? It just went by in this sort of bizarre blur, and totally surreal, utterly surreal.
I wanted to ask you also, you've got Dee Reese's new movie coming up next, right? Is that?
Potentially, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Independent film.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I was a
Yeah.
big Mudbound fan,
Yeah,
so I
she's
didn't know
great.
if there was any update at all. Or
Not at present.
Okay.
Fingers crossed.
fingers crossed indeed.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.